Talk Show.
Recorded live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Genesis Science Fiction Radio Show, a service of the BlackScienceFictionSociety.com website. My name is William Hayashi. I'll be your host for tonight for the October 18th, 2013 edition, which is special for me because today is my birthday and I am 82 years young. Amazing how well I sound. Tonight's special guest is Talitha McEachin, and she's another triple, quadruple threat. I mean, she's a writer. She also does considerable work, Black Literature Magazine, all over the Internet. We'll get all of the your links together and start giving them out during the show. How's that sound?
Sounds wonderful.
And welcome to the show. How are you today?
I am fantastic. Thank you for having me. How are you? And happy birthday.
Thank you very much. He says I'm 42. I have socks that are 42. Anyway, one of the things I want to ask is, where are you coming to us from tonight?
I am a Southerner. I'm born and raised and live in Atlanta, Georgia, best city in the world.
And that's where you are now?
I am.
Yeah, we let you people from Atlanta think that your city is good, but those of us in Chicago know the truth. So that's okay. You go right ahead and you keep thinking that. Actually, and the thing is, I want to go to Atlanta. There's a bunch of conventions down there I'd like to attend,
right.
Black art, creative black conventions that I want to attend down there. The only time I spent down there was actually a layover at the airport.
Oh,
so
are you kidding me? Oh,
yeah,
I have to come.
I do need to visit. I really need to visit. So did you say you were born there and pretty much spent your early years there, or what?
Yes, I was born and raised here in the city. And, I'm not one of those people from Atlanta that grew up in Lawrenceville or Macon and says, I'm from Atlanta. I was born and raised in the city. You have a lot of that. Grew up here. I lived here my entire life. I love the city. And it's my home.
Mm-hmm. And so I'm thinking elementary school, grammar school. What was your early school years like?
My early school years were preschool here.
Oh, that okay.
Yeah, we go way back. I grew up in a neighborhood called Ben Hill.
Okay.
Also we call it the SWAT, which just stands for Southwest Atlanta. I live about, I want to say without traffic, probably about 15 minutes from downtown. But I'm about almost equal distance from the downtown Atlanta and the airport. But it's a working middle class black neighborhood. You got your teachers, all the working class. Grew up here with my parents. I'm the oldest of three children. I have a brother that's 3 years younger than me and a sister that's 8 years younger than me. Well, we grew up in this community. Went to, like I said, preschool here. Went to Thicket Elementary School, Ralph Bunce Middle School, and I went to D.M. Farrell High School. And also for college, I went to Emory University as well as Georgia State University. So I'm completely homegrown.
Yeah, I was going to say that's kind of like definitely a homebody kind of upbringing.
Right. And my parents are, I guess, well, they're from they are from the South, but my mother's from Alabama. My dad was from North Carolina. They moved here in 75. I was born in 77. So, but yes, I've been here my entire life and watched the city change and different events take place. But I love my community. I love it here very much, and I'm very happy to see the really burgeoning arts community here. I mean, visual arts, writing, everything. I mean, this is the place. It's really wonderful to see that. And like you said, there are a lot of festivals, a lot of events here every year. The National Black Arts Festival has been coming here every year for years. Actually, usually at the mall right around the corner from where I grew up. So So yeah, I like the city and like how we've grown artistically.
And normally you're on my side of the interview desk
I
instead of
am.
instead of being the person interviewed. The, how did you? Well, I'm not going to ask you about how you feel about that because I know how I feel when I have to be interviewed. I think that I don't have a whole lot to say. You know, I'm usually trying to get the other person to say things, but tell us a little bit about how you started your career. You know, in I guess we call it blog talk or radio. It's an online radio show, correct?
Right. Well, there's a few things. First of all, I obviously write fiction and talk about fiction a lot as an editorial writer for Black Literature magazine.
Of course.
That actually started in 2000, the very end of 2009, really the beginning of 2010. And I had a friend of mine who messaged me, and she just said, you know, they're looking for editorial writers, looking for people to kind of, different, bring something different to the site, because a lot of what was there already was more about urban fiction, or in a lot of things, there wasn't a lot about speculative fiction, or a lot of articles and things just about literary fiction in general. And
this is for Black Literature magazine, the online magazine, correct?
Yes.
And for those who are listening, hang on a second. For those who are listening, it's the site is, and you don't need the www. It's blackliteraturemagazine.net, and if you want to check that out. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's fine. And I was like, okay, and I contacted the editor in charge, and I said, okay, I'm interested in writing what I have to do. And she said, well, just, write an article, send me an article. Let me check it out and see. So I wrote this article juxtaposing the fiction of Toni Morrison and that of Octavia Butler. And I talked about how these two Black female writers, their different outlooks on the institution of slavery, Toni Morrison and Beloved, and Octavia Butler and Kindred. And I compared and contrast and talked about how basically their goal was kind of the same in representing or portraying the institution of slavery and what it did to Black people at that time. And anyway, I compared and contrasted those books, and I wrote this article up. I sent it to her in the same day she wrote back. She was like, okay, you're in. Right for us. I also am a political blogger. I have a very large following politically. I am a Black female conservative. I call myself a reluctant Republican who also writes science fiction and about writing. So I'm like, so it's, and I also write for Kane TV, which is the former GOP presidential candidate, Herman Cain, his website. I write about conservative politics. I'm kind of and people say, oh, you criticize the Republican Party all this a lot. So I'm kind of like that person on the right who's very kind of critical. But I have a lot of fun. I have a large following with that. And I'm not the type of person that's really interested in a lot of labels. You're this, you're that. I'm just interested in ideas, and I'm interested in compromising and doing what will work. And that's been pretty successful for me because I think most people just don't like extremists, and I don't. So from that, I also write for Yahoo Voices about writing, about politics, about a number of things. I started writing for them about a year ago. So I have my own website and blog where I talk about all kinds of things, writing, politics, all sorts of things. But I like to think of myself as a person that kind of bridges the gap in America between people of all walks of life, just respecting everyone, respecting who they are, what they believe, and just trying to find a way for us all to just kind of get what needs to be done, and skip all the extremism, skip all the partisan politics and everything. So that's who I am, as a person and as a writer. So I've, written for a number of sites and everything. And Black Literature Magazine, it's been really wonderful, and I've had the opportunity to interview a lot of very talented writers. Of course, I've interviewed Jarvis about Black Science Fiction Society. In fact, I started a series about Black speculative fiction because I really wanted to create even more awareness within the Black community and the America's community at large about Black speculative fiction, which, as I see it, is just speculative fiction where you have the central heroes, antagonists, protagonists, characters who are of African descent, people of color. We all know that speculative fiction and general science fiction, fantasy, horror, it encompasses all of those things, is, in general, it's white, male dominated.
Of course.
That's just, what it is. And I think that the time has, really, there have been a lot of fantastic writers who are friends of mine. Some of them I know, some I don't, who just really broke barriers. Of course, Octavia Butler being the queen, of everyone. And she's such a phenomenal writer. She is my number one favorite writer of all time. And I like a lot of writers. I read a lot. I read about 2 books of fiction a week, when I can, at the minimum 1.
Sure.
And she's just the queen. So that's the perspective I come when I write for Black Literature Magazine. I try to talk about those things because everything else, is other genres and yet needs to be represented as well.
Yeah, and yet you have never, ever interviewed me. I'm stricken.
Never.
I'm hurt, but that's okay. We'll get back to that later. All right, so now that you've given your resume,
pretty much,
which we could have spread out over a couple of hours, but you wanted to do it in the first 15 minutes, like somebody was going to forget you. Let's go back to, when you started writing. I mean, obviously you do creative writing. You also do, expository writing. You do analysis. You do political analysis. And I was told to play nice with you because I'm a progressive. You claim to come from the Rodney King school of politics where we should all get along. And seriously, there is a lot to be said about that. It's only in the past generation, essentially since Ronald Reagan, that politics has become so polarizing.
Oh, absolutely. I completely agree.
People cannot find common ground because they treat it as if they've given in, if they could even find value in people on the other side of the aisle. And that's really sad because what it does is it tears communities apart.
Absolutely.
and prevents people from working well together to solve problems. I think we saw that in the last 2 weeks when we had a small minority essentially hold the country hostage, and in the end they got absolutely nothing for it. So, it was a sad exercise that really served nobody.
And I'm probably one of maybe a handful of Republicans who was completely against it. Let me just say that. So it's just, you're right. You're completely right about the state of things. And in my writing, which we'll talk about, I think some of my political philosophy comes through.
Right.
And I just, obviously, we all don't have to like each other or get along, but I think there's just not as much compassion anymore as much with a lot of things. I have family members who work for the federal government who were set at home for 16 days and, were out of work and everything. And I'll just say this, and I don't want to turn into...
No, go ahead and say it. That's the thing. Your opinions are valid,
I'll just say that, as a Republican, as a conservative, I was completely disappointed by the Republicans in Congress. I thought it was selfish and childish, and I make no bones about my opinions. I'm pretty straightforward, Jarvis can tell you, on my Facebook page, and I don't care if right-wingers or left-wingers or poly-wingers, whatever. I don't care if people, don't agree with me, because I don't do this to people to agree with or like me. But I just felt like, Barack Obama, the Democratic House and Senate, they got Obamacare passed. It was challenged. It went to the highest court in the land, a conservative justice tipping the scales and writing the majority opinion,
Yes, but you
law.
know what?
So
no, you're right.
Like, when that happens, just kick back. If it's going to fail, it's going to fail. But give it that chance to fail or succeed. And if you don't have a plan in place, which Republicans never really came out with a plan. Romney never came out with a plan for health care in his campaign, and he had Romney Care in Massachusetts. So, we know he wasn't really serious about coming through with anything else for health care. But anyway, the point is that the majority of Americans want something revolutionary new with health care. Republicans have been in office for Bush term. None of them have ever tried to fix the problems that we have with health care. So, you had your term. The left won. So, hey, concede, be quiet,
And do it graciously. Well, I mean, actually, the Republicans do have a proposal for health care, and that is allowing the health care providers to do whatever the hell they want. I mean, and that, I know that's a gross simplification, but they're very happy allowing the corporations to dictate, policy in a lot of areas in this country. And I think that what we're seeing, I think that Barack Obama's election was kind of a bellwether, and it was also an indicator of exactly how things are. The pendulum is swinging back from, more conservative America to a more liberal or progressive America, where we don't leave people behind just because we can.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And, speaking of my family, even growing up with my parents, and my dad was a Democrat turned Republican. He passed away 3 years ago, but
I hope he gets
even
better.
With that, he was always really compassionate. He used to always talk to me, about the poor and helping the poor. He would always, so that's kind of where that comes from with me. I'm also a Christian, and that's just who I am, but I respect everyone else's beliefs and all of that. I have a very strong libertarian lean on some things. For example, when it comes to same-sex marriage, because my goal, I want the government to be out of marriage altogether. I don't think the government should tell anyone who they can and can't marry. Ultimately, I would like to see civil unions for everyone, including heterosexual couples, because it would achieve the goal of getting the government out of marriage. But that's just me, and that's just one example. That's not a Republican thing. The right completely most disagree with me on that, and they don't like that. But hey.
But you're right. The traditional Republican view was government has no business in those, in those kinds of areas.
Right.
You look at Goldwater Republicans. You look at Eisenhower Republicans, and they did not want, the government injecting itself into social. Into the social issues of the day like that.
Right.
Traditional Republicans could care less about abortion because, and especially libertarians, figure you do whatever the hell you want, just don't hurt anybody else doing it. Okay?
Right.
And so you look at those two things, and then we find this very vocal minority, Republican tail wagging the Republican dog, that has been very, very, very outspoken on, managing society and even doing it at the expense of good governance. I mean, when you vote 43 times to defund the Affordable Care Act, which is already in place, when you vote as many times as you do to try to restrict a constitutionally protected medical procedure, when you start doing things like that, I think that's one of the reasons why the Republican Party is losing traction with independents and moderate people, because it's just too
make no
extreme.
mistake, I am pro-life. I'm not happy with Obamacare, in particular the individual mandate. I don't like that, and he slammed Hillary Clinton and Hillary Care for her individual mandate and turned out and had one. But at the same time, I recognize that in terms of actuarial science, you pretty much have to. But I'm still like, you know what? I don't like it. This and the other. I'm just kind of like in observation mode. I'm going to see what's going to happen.
Yeah, it's really too early to tell. You're absolutely right. It is too early to tell, and people getting so bent out of shape about it this early, are doing so for reasons other than operational ones. I mean, obviously these are purely political ones.
Right. Yeah. The right is. I think that the right tries to preserve tradition, and there's a need for that to a certain extent. I think that the progressives, the right, are innovative and try to reach into the future, and there's a need for that. It's just a matter of having just the right amounts at the right time of both.
That's true. Well, that is true, and I mean the sad deal about politics is how polarized it is.
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely. And the other thing that really angers me is how the Fourth Estate has abdicated its responsibilities, because essentially, our big media is corporate media, and corporate media has an agenda. And, and once they rolled all of the news divisions under the entertainment divisions of these mega conglomerates, and they had to start making money from their commercials, then they had to be concerned with ratings. And once you're concerned with ratings, sometimes the objective reporting of the news is the first and worst victim. So, people aren't always getting a good shake in terms of getting the news of the day, figuring out what's really working, what's not working, where problems may be occurring. And I would say that, the ubiquity of the dumbing down of America, which started during Nixon's time. Nixon declared war on the intelligentsia because, the anti-war movement came out of college and high school campuses and said, well, we can't have smart people. And let's do this No Child Left Behind thing. Let's not fund it, and let's make sure that our kids are just smart enough to make change at McDonald's. And that's a real problem, because when people are not aware, they're more easily led. And if they're more easily led, they're more easily, let's say, misled,
Right, and I think it's important to note that the dumbing down crosses racial lines. One of the biggest problems that I have with some on the right, and it's not everyone, but I just think that for some, it's always the welfare queens. We've done such a good job, our society, of painting the black woman as the welfare queen. And it's always these welfare queens with all these children with different baby daddies, and these Obama voters who vote 43
driving a Cadillac. Driving a Cadillac.
And it's always, there's so much stereotyping in politics that's very distasteful to me. And I just think, for some on the right, I'm just like, it's such a hard thing, because you want to attract minority voters, not just black people, but Hispanics, but yet you see black people as inferior. We only voted for Obama, and not we, because I didn't vote for Obama either time, but I'm just saying in general as a community, we only vote for Obama because he's black. We voted for Obama because of handouts. And that's the meme that I just hear a lot from some, and I'm just like, you can't do that and then lament on why black people vote, Democrat.
Yes.
For a lot of them, they're voting anti-Republican for that very reason. And getting the message across to the right is so hard sometimes with some.
They've got that echo chamber. They have their own media echo chamber, and they only hear what they want to hear, and then they only believe the feedback that they get from their cheerleaders. Let's look back at the 2012 election, and we're going to have to get to your writing and fiction in a minute, because normally we don't talk politics, but in the 2012 election, Republicans all over the country, and at all levels, we're talking about at the highest level in the Republican Party, all the way down to the Republican in the street, they were convinced that the Romney-Ryan ticket was going to win in a landslide. They were utterly convinced. They couldn't even conceive in 2012 of another term of Barack Obama, and so a lot of them now think that somebody messed with votes and things like that.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is, you can't live inside your own head and expect to have good perspective and a good understanding of the world around you. And I think that's one of the things, finding you as a black Republican woman, normally I would be very sarcastic and say, so how much self-loathing do you have in your soul in order to be that? But the fact of the matter is, you are not typical. You're not typical, because
everybody keeps telling me that. My friends on the left, they're just like, people on the left on my page and in the blogosphere tell me that they say, Talitha, you're like the only Republican I can tolerate. I'm just like, really? Oh my God.
You're a purist. You are an old school Republican. You're not one of these extremists. If we take the Tea Party, and that's how stupid they were. They were so stupid they named themselves after a sexual practice and didn't know. Okay, so anyway, the whole Tea Party movement is an AstroTurf organization. It's not grassroots at all, and essentially what it was very, very wealthy people funding, rallies and things in order to fight health care and in some parts fight against this president. And what it did was it unearthed that 18% of whites who are still upset that the South lost the Civil War, and turned it into something very, very ugly. With you're a purist in terms of politics, and you say, the traditional values of the Republican Party speak to you.
Oh, they absolutely do.
You don't have any advocates, almost no advocates left in the Senate and in the House at the federal level who follow the same kind of conservative doctrine that you find attractive, and that's got to be pretty frustrating for you.
It does frustrate me, and I stick to my guns. I'm about principles, and I'm about fairness, and I'm about extending humanity to everyone. And I don't care about labels. I just had a Facebook friend, and actually a few Facebook friends actually recently. I have a follower on my page, and he's a communist, essentially, and very, very intelligent man. I disagree with him a lot on a lot of things, but he challenges me, and I on my page I just allow free reign of thought. You only have to be respectful and civil,
right?
But I don't censor my page in that sense, and and people said to me, why do you allow him on your page? He's a communist. Look at his page. And then it became either you stay friends with me or you block him. And I had to say, wait a minute. You don't dictate who comments on my page. I disagree with him a lot, but no one can tell me that I don't, in other words, I don't surround myself in just a conservative bubble. And I think that's the problem with a lot of conservatives, is that when you just surround yourself with people who appraise and agree with you, the reason that I am the way I am the way I am as a person and as a thinker, philosopher, as a Republican, as a conservative, as a small L libertarian, is because I surround myself with diversity of thought.
Mm-hmm.
That's just who I am, and it keeps me from going to the extreme. It's a balance. That's what I go for. And anytime I post things people disagree with on the right, I'm a rhino, or I'm a this, that, and the other for some. And then some will just say, well, I disagree with you on this, but they know who I am,
right.
And that's just kind of how it is. But I believe in balance. I believe in sanity, listening to other ideas even when you don't disagree, so you can be challenged mentally. And people share things with me politically, and they disagree with me. Liberals, who disagree with me on this, that, and the other. I think about it. One of my closest blogger friends is Yvette Carnell. She's the owner of the site BreakingBrown.com. She's a sort of a flaming liberal, but she's kind of the liberal version of me, in a sense. And we talk a lot about issues. I listen to her ideas, say, I listen to my conservative friends, but I kind of listen to everybody, take it all in, and I think about it. I think about what the best solution is, and I present it and see what people think. It's kind of like that with me. I just was raised to be kind, to be courteous. At the same time, I don't take any mess. You won't disrespect me, anything like that. And to just try to bridge the gap as much as I can without compromising my Christian faith or my values, as much as possible. And then there are just some things politically, I think, where you can't really take consideration of your personal faith or beliefs. When it comes to some legislation, it just is what it is as far as the Constitution and what's allowed. You can't say, we don't live in a theocracy. You can't say, well, I'm a Christian and this is how it should be because of that.
The typical issue that everybody always brings up is the two issues. I'm a Christian, and there should never be abortion, even when a woman's life is in danger. And you and I both know.
And I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that.
Yeah, that's an extreme view that's not only dangerous, but it's silly. It's patently silly, because first of all, if you're a true conservative, then that the libertarian portion of that forces you to allow people to go to hell in a handbasket if that's what they want to do. It's not your job to dictate to somebody else how they should behave. And the other thing about marriage equality, if you're not into marriage equality, if you're not into two people of the same sex marrying, then don't marry somebody of the same sex. Okay, don't do it. I'm not going to make you do it. And the thing that always cracked me up, and it is amusing, is when conservatives say, marriage equality threatens my marriage. And I go, well, then you need counseling. You don't need politics.
I don't see the same-sex marriage. Well, first of all, the percentage of the LGBT community that wants to get married, that literally wants to get married, is actually low. It's actually lower than a lot of people think. A lot of people think that people are just going to run in the streets and have, it's just really, it's really not like that. I have my views as a Christian and how I feel about that. And as you said, I would never marry a woman. That's
right.
Not who I am.
Yeah, it's not in the cards for you. It ain't gonna happen.
It's not gonna happen. I'm not gonna marry a woman. But I just feel like this as a Christian, from my perspective. Listen, if you want to go around and sleep, and I'm not saying you, I just mean you in general.
No, the editorial, yes, because
the editorial.
Well, I'm a former disc jockey. I had my slut years, so and I, but go ahead. Yes, I know you weren't talking to me this time. Yeah.
And if you want to sleep with every man, that you see, that's your business. I don't agree with the lifestyle, But at the same time, your doing that does not affect me one bit.
Exactly.
It doesn't affect me. And also, spiritually, in terms of my faith, I'm not going to not go to heaven because you slept with 500 men.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I
mean, it has nothing. It has nothing to do with you.
Of belief. Yeah, it doesn't affect me. You know,
right.
now I may, if we're cool and we're friends, and I may share with you how I feel about certain things, but human beings have free will. You know, and I have a degree, one in biology and one in philosophy. So, philosophically, I'm kind of, really have ruminated and thought about these things. But, people need to understand that, and I understand too from the conservative side, the concern that the institution of marriage should kind of be, because that's how human beings, that's how we populate the earth. Is a man and woman, and then granted that doesn't require marriage.
Okay, let me back up. I'm going to back you up a little bit, and then you're going to have to do some homework, and then you're going to have to come back to me and apologize, okay? Because originally, the institution of marriage was one man and several women. So that's from the beginning.
In the Old Testament, that took place, sure.
Well, it's even mentioned in the Bible. So when people try to throw things like that, I'm sure it offends you as much as me, because first of all, do what you're going to do, as long as you don't hurt my friends, my people, or anybody else, someone's child, whatever. But don't, George Carlin had a great take on that. He said that religion is like lifts for your shoes.
Well, let me tell you this.
All right, go ahead.
And I shared that in terms of the whole marriage debate, period.
Yes.
I felt that we should all have civil unions because it removes the government from marriage. And,
it really does. It does. But see, the thing is there are so many laws that have been written traditionally for, hundreds and hundreds of years based upon the institution of marriage and going obviously that's going to make a lot of money for lawyers. But you're absolutely right. The government should not be in the business of regulating a social construct.
And the only reason that marriage licenses are required is because of the interracial marriage. Marriage licenses were put in place to keep black people and white people from marrying.
Yep.
State of Virginia versus Loving. And and my conservative friends probably cringe. I mean, they have cringed when I've said this, but in my resolution to the marriage problem where everyone gets civil unions, I allow polygamy because I don't think you can address this issue without addressing polygamy, because if it's about religious freedom too, and even if Christians and people, not just Christians, Muslims are very, very staunchly against same-sex marriage or homosexuality, period.
Sure.
If if you want to use the argument that God created Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve, and I'm just, simplifying
I know.
Said,
right.
Then, what about this person, Mormons or whoever else, whose Bible, in quotations, their good book says, you can have 8 wives. And I just think in a country with a constitution that gives religious freedom, but you're limiting the expression of that freedom. So I don't have a problem if somebody wants to have 10 wives or 10 husbands, as long as they're all consenting adults and the age of consent in the state is met. We're not having grown men, 20, 30-year-old men marrying 5-year-olds. As long as everybody's an adult and they're all with it, hey, go for it. I'm not going to do it, but, so, like I said, I consider myself a conservative libertarian. GOP has to kind of get it together. There are a lot of, things going on the right. There are some things that in terms of principle, that I'm happy with, and then there are other things in terms of things people are saying and doing, that I'm not happy with. Dr. Benjamin Carson, whom I highly respect as a neurosurgeon and as a man, just came out and said that the ACA, Obamacare, was the worst. Basically, it's just the worst thing since chattel slavery in America. I mean, I could not have been more disappointed in him. He said other things that I disagree with, but I was just so disgusted with that because, number one, we're so close to next 2014 is the year that the election year, for the Congress and local elections. So
Sure.
I'm just so close to that year that he used to say that. But the worst thing to shadow slavery, he needs to read Kindred and he needs to read Beloved. Are you kidding me?
Hell, he should watch Roots.
No,
Let him watch Roots.
Yeah, he should watch Roots. It's not the worst thing since slavery. I mean, I respect him, but it's like, man, I even wrote about him on Yahoo when everyone kept saying, he should run for president. I disagree, and I said I'll watch and see. But, I'm just like, I'm telling you, just tying speculative fiction in, if people just read more and understood where these black speculative fiction authors who've written about slavery, even Stephen Barnes, who is a good friend of mine, Lion's Blood, the alternative history fiction. I mean, it's like, man, if I could just lock you in a room and tell you you can't get out until you read these books, I would give him Stephen Barnes' Lion Blood. I would give him Kindred. I would give them Beloved. Because you need to understand what you're saying when you say that healthcare is the worst thing since slavery. I mean, and I don't understand.
I know, but you know what? That's
coming from the right.
But that part of that is, the thing that we both agreed on before, which is the ubiquity of the dumbing down of America. People are not as facile, as abstract thinkers anymore. People are, and part of it is because society has gotten faster. People have had to work harder. They put in longer hours, things like that, so they don't have the luxury of maybe,
right,
kind of a freewheeling intellectual endeavor. But here's a really sad statistic. I took my ACT and SAT tests in like 1972, and up until okay, stop it.
That's about 20 years before I took mine. About 23 years.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Well, I told you I was 82 today. Anyway, but between then and 2008, between 1972 and 2008, the scoring indexes of both of those tests have been revised downward. It's either 16 or 18 times.
Now, that's something I didn't know, and I used to tutor. That's interesting.
And,
wow.
And the reason why is because on a national average, kids are not learning as much. And they're certainly not, there's a lot of these things floating around the internet. There's an 8th grade test, on civics that everybody in 8th grade used to have to pass, in the 30s, 40s, 50s, back then. Mm-hmm. And nobody can pass the damn thing today.
And see, and this is where you and conservatives would meet and shake hands.
Well, exactly. Except that the people who claim that they're conservatives have hijacked that whole thing, and they are happy with underachievement. They are happy with. They're happy.
Wait a minute.
Wait. Let me finish.
Conservatives who are happy with underachievement. Hold on.
Let me finish. I swear to you, I'll make my point. All right.
Okay.
Anytime you have, let's put it this way. In many cases where you have liberal professors teaching social studies, teaching, let's just go back. They're teaching cause and effect. What they're doing is they're forcing their students.
In terms of history?
In terms of history, in terms of sociology, even in terms of psychology. And what, when they were teaching the tools of analysis, a lot of them came under severe criticism, and a lot of them even got bounced out of their positions, even tenured positions, because they were being too liberal. Instead of teaching, whatever the hard line of social studies was, here, 7th grade. No, I take that back. Sophomore year of high school. When you have world history, that whole segment on the white man's burden, where it was the burden of the white man to bring civilization to the rest of the world, specifically to parts of the world that had been civilized for a millennium before Europe were wearing clothes, before they were, out of their animal skins. Asia, Africa. I mean, man originated in Africa. I don't think, you don't.
I mean, there's not a scientist who's not a redneck who will tell you otherwise.
Exactly.
I mean, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's kind of tough. But you know what? Let's get away from politics, because we could actually talk about this for about 6 or 7 weeks.
Oh, yes.
But let's do this. I'm curious about, for your creative writing, for your fictional writing, how does your, and let's call it is rather unique, because you're a black, female, conservative with libertarian leanings. How does that manifest itself in your writing, or do you kind of gloss over that? Do you go around that? Is that not in there? I mean, when you're creating, something fictional, what's your process? What's your process?
Well, first of all, the current series that I'm working on now is entitled The Elements. It's a planned trilogy with probably a prequel. Well, I plan to write a prequel. It may end up being more books, but first of all, the book comes out in spring of 2014. I just want to say that it's being edited by Nisi Shaw, who is a fantastic, award-winning writer and book critic in her own right. And we're working together with that. But The Elements, it's so interesting that you ended that note talking about kind of the dawn of civilization and going back in time and talking about how we were civilized so long ago.
Sure.
Back in 2000, just to give you some background, back in 2003, I was literally in my apartment in Marietta, Georgia, and at the time I had lost my job and I was home, and I was not watching the news. It was March of 2003. And I was watching the news, and this is when then President Bush was first ordering troops into Iraq, which I did not agree with. And I was really kind of angered by that and saddened by that, and it caused me to start to really think. At the time, I was actually working on a mainstream fiction piece, sort of autobiographical piece, and I kind of put it aside because when I saw the war, when I saw that he was ordering troops into Iraq, I decided that I had to write something about war. Like I had to use the gift that I had of writing to communicate how I felt. And I just started really brainstorming. I brainstormed for several weeks, and I finally started thinking about what if, because speculative fiction often starts, I have a degree in science, so you're taught the scientific method to first ask a question, to develop a hypothesis. And I think it's the same process with speculative fiction writing. The difference is that in speculative fiction writing, you don't have the limits that you would have in a laboratory, in an actual test. And I started thinking, well, what if our ability to wage war with one another over petty things, because I, didn't think we should be in Iraq, what if that we were somehow symbiotically linked to one another so that what happened to one, would happen to the whole? And so I thought of the story, and I came up with this story, and it's changed, over the years from when I first wrote it. But this is a story of the two tribes, and this story goes back, way back, before the continental divide, during the time of Pangea.
Right.
When
all what Pangea is,
and when all the continents worked together. And it is a story of the two tribes, the Kishnu and the Lungi, and they are basically at war. They end up, let me say this, they're at war, but in my book, the elements of earth, wind, water, fire, are also aliens who come to the planet, and they're living and breathing. They take on the flesh of their element, earth, wind, water, fire.
Okay.
And essentially, people at war, they fight. All of the elements except one can inhabit their body of humans or take on the human body, and they decide, we have to leave. They're bad earthquakes, and they decide they have to leave the land, which is we know as Pangea, to go for one lone continent that's far away to receive food, aid, medicine, help. And, once they're there, the inhabitants ask something of them in order to receive aid. They end up agreeing, and basically the people are all symbiotically linked. And so that's what it is.
All the people. You're talking about all the people, right?
Right. All of the Kishnu and all of the Lungi.
We're symbiotically linked. Okay, yeah.
Right, biologically. So that if one person, if I take a spear or whatever and kill you, 4 people for each tribe are killed, etc.
Sure.
I just really wanted to show, especially America, because America loves warmongering, and here's where my political philosophy comes in. It's fascinating enough as a black female right-winger, because I think my side is obsessed with war and defense spending, and it irritates the hell out of me. Sorry if I wasn't supposed to say hell. But, and I wanted to show that if we can get along when we're forced to, we certainly can do so of our own volition. And that was the point, and that's kind of how the story was born. There are a whole lot of other twists and turns, of course, that I'm not talking about, but that's essentially the story, and my political philosophy does come through a lot. And it also my experience, there were a few years in my life where I was an unorthodox Muslim, and my experience with that, so again, I'm another right-winger who doesn't just think that all Muslims are the devil, are Satan, and want, to kill us all. My experience is, and I honestly thank God for who I am and the experiences that I've gone through, because it's kept away a lot of prejudices that I could have if I let the right completely absorb me.
Right,
I don't think all
irrational,
are
standardized, irrational
I don't think all
and
Muslims
standardized,
are terrorists, and I will never think that, because I used to be one for a few years. My ex-husband with an unorthodox group of Muslims, and I know for a fact that they're not all terrorists and jihadists and want to bomb America. So, my political philosophy comes through a lot, in my work, a whole lot. And there are other things that are not congruous with my political philosophy. There's some feminism in my writing with some characters, which was a challenge for me because I'm not a feminist at all.
Right. Well, Talitha, are you sitting down, by the way?
I am.
I just want to let you know that even though you don't know it, you're more of a liberal progressive than you are a conservative libertarian. And we'll talk about this after the show, because I've got a PhD in clinical psychology, and I might be able to help.
Oh.
Because seriously, because your views, and I don't mean that. I don't say that meanly at all. It's just that, and even you realize it. Your views are far more traditional conservative, which are actually, they're not that far from progressive, because 70% of the people in this country are socially liberal and fiscally conservative.
I believe
there's that overlap, and yet you will have people fighting tooth, claw, and nail to hang on to whatever designation that they want to be called, instead of digging deeper into finding out, well, basically we're pretty much all the same. We all want the same things. Why are we fighting? And I think that sounds a little bit like, how you grounded your story. It's like, a crime upon, committed upon you is a crime committed upon me, because we are all we're all in the same boat. We live in the same country. We live on the same earth.
We all live on the same earth. Yeah. Well, I'll say that.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. I think that I think that because of my Christian faith on a lot of social issues, I guess the reason why I say I would lean more libertarian is just because there are things that I personally feel that don't come into play in things that I want legislatively done. I separate.
Well, of course. Yeah, of course, because you're absolutely right. Because again, if we go back to, let me just tell you the George Carlin thing I was going to say. He said it's like lifting your shoes because religion is like lifting your shoes because it gives you confidence. It does something for you. It's not normally visible to somebody else, which you can't just look at a person and see what their religion is. He says, but two things. He says one thing is you don't force other people to wear your shoes. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is you don't go around to other country and nail your shoes to the natives' feet. And so your views are, I mean, that's a pretty progressive view because, if we're to believe what, excuse me, a lot of our conservative politicians believe, then we're supposed to hate Muslims. We're supposed to be, that every black person is a criminal until proven otherwise. That every Latino is obviously in the country illegally, and on and on and on. And I mean, and that's just an ugly circumstance to even think about living. It's just it's not humanistic. I don't think it. I mean, it obviously offends you, and it doesn't serve us well as a people.
It does offend me. It does offend me, but like I said, there's certain things, like I am pro-life. I am.
Well, everybody's pro-life.
I do understand.
Okay, wait. Let's back up.
Let me say this because I know what you're going to say. I know what you're going to say because my little friends tell me. They say, look, and I learned this a few months ago, and one of my liberal friends, well, two of them said to me, look, I want to decrease the number of abortions just like you do, in this way, in this way, in this way.
Sure.
And no one is pro-abortion, first of all.
Yeah, nobody's pro-abortion.
Nobody's pro-abortion. I mean, you may have a couple of wackos, but no one's pro-abortion, and I've learned that.
Yeah.
But I believe that life is precious and a gift from God, and is so there are just certain things. And if someone asks me a question, and I understand the pro-choice movement though, because for years, like pro-choice friends say, hey, we just think. I don't know. I think that it comes down to, and for me, I put it in a Christian perspective, the right of each one of us to sin or not to sin. So if you decide, Mary Jo, that you want to have that abortion, I wish you wouldn't. But it is between you and God, and I think that given our Constitution, given the country that we live in, I think that the government, Roe versus Wade, has just said, hey, to each his own on that. And I just, it's so difficult for me.
But
that is one area where it's just like, I am pro-life.
And I do understand. Honest to God, I do understand. But not everybody believes the same things you believe, even from a religious perspective. You know what I'm saying?
I know. Absolutely.
And my joke, but not joke, and I'm an ordained minister. I've been ordained since 2001. My
really?
Joke, but not joke. Yeah. Oh yeah. Is that we have had 10,000 years of insults, of fighting, and of killing over who has the best imaginary friend, and the reason why is because feel free to use that one, or tell you what, when you have me on the show, I'll say all these things.
Oh my gosh!
But seriously, the thing is that not everybody believes the same as everybody else, and that's the other part of conservatism, and especially libertarianism, that is so attractive to even progressives and liberals, is the fact that you choose your own path, And as long as that path does not intersect somebody else's in a bad way, travel your own path. Have your own values.
Right.
Hang on a second. You're listening to the Genesis Science Fiction Radio show, a service of the BlackScienceFictionSociety.com website. And tonight is the October 18th, 2013, Happy Birthday to Me episode. And we're talking to Talitha McEachin. She is obviously a political blogger and a very political person, a speculative fiction writer, editor. Actually, the list of what she isn't is a lot shorter than the list of what she is. So anyway, let's get back to your creativity. You've got this series coming out, right? And how many volumes do you think it's going to be? A trilogy, maybe with a prequel?
4 total, maybe more, and I'm working on that. And like I said, Nisi Shaw, wonderful writer in her own right, and she's also a book critic and reviewer for the Seattle Times. She is going to be the editor for the volume. And I've shared, even on my website, theelementsbooks.com, and on my Facebook page, I've shared some excerpts and gotten a lot of, and on, actually, let me back up, and on BlackScienceFictionSociety.com, and have gotten, a lot of very wonderful feedback. And, for me, the transition into speculative fiction, it wasn't, I used to say as a writer early on, and I've always been a very, very avid reader. My dad, I grew up, my dad, my mom, in my house in the South, Christian family, and my parents really believed there were certain days, I think it was just like 2 or 3 days a week. Yeah, it was like 3 days a week. We had to turn the TV off. We had to read. It was a requirement. It was just turn the idiot box off, go read. And I used to read everything. I used to sit up, and I remember back then still had door-to-door encyclopedia salesmen, and my parents ordered the World Book Encyclopedia, I want to say 1983, 84, somewhere right in there. And I used to sit up in my room, and I used to read the encyclopedia. My mother could tell you, like, I used to just read and read and read, and I'm always so thirsty for knowledge and wanting to know, and I just really, I would say that the seed for speculative fiction was planted before I even knew such a thing as speculative fiction existed.
Sure.
I would read the Iliad, Odyssey, and I developed a love for epic fantasies. I mean, early on, before I even knew I wanted to be a writer, I used to say I'm going to be a doctor or a scientist primarily, and that's why I have a degree in biology. I studied biology and philosophy, and I used to read the Iliad, the Odyssey. I mean, poetry. Edgar Allan Poe is one of my favorite poets, and all these things. And even with my book, it just happened to be that I found out or realized that speculative fiction was the best means for exploring the way I felt post or during the Iraqi War.
Yeah, through your imagination.
Right, it just have a vast imagination. And then, it wasn't. I didn't start reading Black speculative fiction until I was probably it wasn't until I was in my early 20s. I don't think I read a single work of fiction by a Black speculative fiction author until I was about 22, 23, 24 years old, and that was the first author I read. Well, aside from Toni Morrison, because technically, well, Beloved is, in the realms of speculative fiction, but the first one, I walked into a bookstore, and I saw this book called Lion's Blood. And Black-owned bookstore in Atlanta called Madu Bookstore in Greenbrier Mall. And I picked it up. I always read the back, and I read it, and I was just fascinated because I had this question in my mind: what if Black people had enslaved white people? And I think it was Toni Morrison who said, if there was a book that you want to read or that hasn't been written, you should write it. And I looked, and I was like, wow, here this is, Stephen Barnes, who has written this book. This is the exact question I had in my mind. What if the roles were reversed?
Sure.
And I got it in Zulu hard right away and read it. And even then, I wasn't aware that was like this black speculative fiction and speculative. I was kind of, I didn't know that there was this just
a whole genre like that,
right?
Like
a
genre that was out of whole cloth. It wasn't just invented.
Right.
It had been around.
Know. I just didn't know. Not even then. I did not know. And then I didn't even hear about Octavia Butler until around 2003, that same year that the Iraqi war, and I started musing and thinking about my book. And then a friend of mine,
Sure.
we call her Blue. She's a playwright in North Carolina, actually. And she said to me, I was writing the other work I told you about, and then I started writing The Elements. It wasn't called The Elements then. And Blue said to me, I said, I'm writing this. She said, what are you writing? She said, well, tell me about it. And I told her about it. And she said, you need to read Octavia Butler. And I said, okay, who is that? I had no idea. And that was like 2004 probably.
Right.
And I said, okay, and that name stayed in my mind. And then, of course, I didn't go read it right away. And I was like, okay. But her name stuck in my head. And it wasn't until 2006 I was, finally like, okay, I need to go. And I went to the bookstore and I started looking for Octavia Butler. And she was, at that time in the Barnes & Noble, she was in both the science fiction section and the African American section. And I finally got it, and I got Kindred first, and I read it in like 48 hours. And it was like in a white, like, I was like, and I was like, oh my God, like where? I just felt so like, where have I been? Like, I haven't read this author. And and I was like, okay. And then I went and I bought like 5 of her books at once. Like, I never want to, when I finish one, I want to immediately start the other. And I just started reading and I was just like, oh my gosh. And I started reading and reading and reading. And then I thought, maybe I should send the author an email or try to find out if she's coming to a book signing and go and have a book signed. And then I found out she had passed away, and it just broke my heart.
Right.
It really did. I was just like, I didn't even know she existed, for a while. And then I finally read her work, and she's gone. And I just, I'm just so grateful for her. She was just a wonderful storyteller, wonderful character development, wonderful use of language. Octavia Butler is hands down a better writer than Ernest Hemingway, who is one of my favorite writers, I mean, than a lot of writers. But, I mean, I was like, wow. And anyway, then I started reading more and realizing there's this whole world of black speculative fiction that you were just none the wiser about.
It is not talked about in the mainstream at all. It has not reached the threshold where, how common culture marketing works. Black musical memes dominate world music now. Remember when world music used to be like reggae or this or that. In terms of worldwide, in terms of worldwide influence, we've got it in terms of music. We've got it in terms of sports.
Right.
But we don't have it in terms of writing. And I think that, and I have a frustration with that, as a writer myself, because I don't think we as a demographic don't read as much. Obviously black women read a lot more than black men. Black men, when they read, largely they read nonfiction. They'll read autobiographies, they'll read business books, they'll read, things like that. Black women are far more into fiction than black men are. And I think that because we don't have the visibility, we don't we don't necessarily get the mainstream. I mean, you look at Stephen Barnes, he
Right.
has done collaborations with Larry Niven. So obviously the science fiction community knows of Stephen Barnes. But if you were to mention his name, in a literary circle, people go, if they know anything, they go, oh, didn't he do The Outer Limits or something? They don't
Right.
they don't see him as a literary
his
property.
Screenwriting.
Yes, they don't think of him as a literary property. And then Octavia Butler is now getting a little more play because so many people admire two things about her. They admire what she wrote, and they admire when she wrote it. When she wrote it is very significant because she's at the head of the line. And so there's a little bit there. Samuel Delaney, he has a certain following, but then people, how people are today, they look at his personality and they judge his writing based upon who he is, not what he writes. So he has a little bit of a threshold problem in terms of publicity too. So I think that the thing that you and I are both frustrated with is the fact that mainstream America knows absolutely nothing about this entire genre.
And it pisses me off. It pisses me off. It does, because, and I encourage people, I have a Facebook book club that's like a lot of people from all different backgrounds. A lot of my Republican friends are in there, white, black, Latino, whatever, Native American. And currently, the current read is Octavia Butler's Wild Seed. And let me tell you, I just read Wild Seed a few months ago.
Okay.
And it just blew my mind. And first of all, all of them blow my mind. I mean, Stephen Barnes, Charles R. Saunders, Samuel Chip Delaney, they are pioneers. And they, blaze the trail for us. Stephen Barnes is a personal friend. He and his wife, Tanana Reeve, do. They just completed not long ago their first short film based on a story they both co-wrote together, Danger Word. I was working with them and part of the campaign to raise funds to finance the film.
I interviewed both of them on this show at the same
time,
or the same night.
Remember.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I remember. And so I have been busy last several months with, even with that. And Stephen Barnes is like, he's like my big brother. He's like this just big wealth of wisdom and observations. And I can't even, it's just like, wow. And we talk a lot, on Facebook and everything, and about politics, about this, that, and the other. It's just like, just amazing person. Writer, screenwriter, all of these things. He and Tanana Reeve. And I really respect him so much. And I'm blessed to have the opportunity even to, work with them. And then meeting writers like Milton Davis and Balagun Ojetade, who are working on their filming their short film now, Rite of Passage, which needs funding. Hit, listeners, because it does. And I just want us to support Black speculative fiction. And I never, of course, had the opportunity to meet Octavia, and then meeting Nisha Shaw. And then last March of this year at Spelman College, Tanana Reeve, there was an event there, and I met Samuel Delaney, Chip, and I met Nisha Shaw, and that's when I first met Stephen Barnes and Tanana Reeve in person and everything. Milton Davis was there, Balagoon was there, a lot of people were there, and I met everyone, Jewel Gomez, Sheree Renee Thomas, all these people in Black speculative fiction. I had the opportunity after the event to have dinner with Nisha Shaw and Samuel Chip Delaney, and it was just amazing. Amazing. And I sat down and spoke with Chip Delaney, who is, a writer, brilliant writer. And I hadn't even read any of his work at the time that I met him, by the way, and I recently told him this. And then I started reading afterwards. I was like, whew, I was like, man, wow. I was like, he is just Wow. So highly, highly intelligent, brilliant writing. And I just couldn't understand even why his works, um, Octavia Butler's in particular. I mean, I was like, they should just even be more popular because a lot of people know about Kendrick with Octavia Butler, but even her other works. I love Wild Seed. I love the Xenogenesis trilogy, was one of my favorites. And I recently read 3 times. I read Fledgling, her last book before she died. But it just frustrates me, sometimes, that more people don't know. But I had dinner at with Chip and Niecy Shaw at the hotel, another sister and I, and just sitting talking with him. And we could talk politics, and everything. And he's a writer, brilliant science fiction writer. He's a gay man, openly gay man. And we talked and everything. And he just told me, not long after that, he told me that you give me hope for the future for the right and left, the political future of this country. And it's just, I just can't tell you how much I've been blessed. And I'm just like, wow. And I just really think that, and I told Niecy Shaw this recently, that I think Black speculative fiction's time is coming. There was after Terry McMillan in the 90s with her novels, and that genre just kind of blew up. I think that same thing is coming with Black speculative fiction, and that's just what I feel in my heart.
I've interviewed a couple people in the past about Afrofuturism, the new buzzword. And I think that right now we're on the leading edge of a huge, huge, huge explosion into common culture. Afrofuturism exploding into common culture. I think we're at the leading edge of that right now. And the frustrations that you feel, the frustrations I feel with 2 things. One, the fact that we don't read as much as we should, as a race.
Collectively, and in general and collectively, I think too. I think Americans in general don't. But as a race, no, we don't.
And the other thing is, and I'm not talking about black guilt marketing, but I'm talking about we don't support our own creatives in a way that you would see. People talk about let's use another example. People talk about the fact, black folks have been here for 500 years now, and this is the best they could do, and then they don't take into account. Well, hell yeah, you haven't heard that?
Oh my
come
God.
on, all you guys, come on! You got Clarence Thomas talking about, I'm the biggest recipient of affirmative action. The highest affirmative action hire in the history of the United States of America, but damn it, I don't want it for anybody else. Anyway, let's move along. But seriously, we have a hard time cooperating and being able to cross-promote other people because we have been taught traditionally since the field Negroes were fighting with the house Negroes that somehow life is a zero-sum game. And if I give you some help, that means that I'm not going to get something because you got the absolute value of 4 cups of help, and that 4 cups can't come back to me. And that's a mentality that exists in our culture and permeates our existence that we have to get the hell away from. Let's talk about the BlackScienceFictionSociety.com website. It's a website that's supposed to support, all kinds of black creatives, and yet every now and then you get that whiff of that, you may be doing something, but mine's more important, and I can't help you even with this little thing which wouldn't cost me a damn bit of my time because I need to do everything for myself, or I won't get it for me. And I think that's a hugely damaging paradigm that we have to get out of. But for Christ's sake, we haven't been able to get out of it for centuries.
Absolutely.
Someone typed in the chat room, "You people." Well, that's exactly it. And the other thing that I've said a few shows back is, we absolutely are about the only people who could have invented the term haters. And that's just sad. That's just sad.
It is. It is.
You know, and you look at political power in this country, and I'm not talking about left and right. I'm talking about political power in terms of numbers.
The elitist. Yes.
Well, there is that. But we've got 12%, between 12 and 15% of the population of this country are black people of various strains, African roots, island roots, whatever roots.
Right.
And we don't wield 15% of the financial power, the political power, anything, the sociological power.
Right,
we are allowed to excel at certain things, but only if white people make money off of us. Chris Rock said something that's very telling. He said there's a difference between wealth and rich. He said Shaq is rich, but the man who signs his check is wealthy.
Yeah, Bill Gates is wealthy. Right.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And so with this zero-sum mentality, there's no reason why I can't go out and say, obviously you and I are different politically, but we're the same in terms of creativity, in terms of speculative fiction. We're both writers of things that are supposed to expand our horizons, our own people's horizons, and hopefully get that crossover to where whites may read it, or Latinos, or Asians, or whatever.
Right.
But we don't have that cooperation that we see in other people. And politically, look at what Latinos are doing. They are going to hopscotch right over black folks, and in 2040, they're going to be running this country. And everybody's going to be mad. But there's no reason to be mad.
Right.
We did it to ourselves because, like in the 1970s, when all of that urban renewal money was being handed out in the black communities, you had black churches, you had all of these black people competing for those federal dollars instead of cooperating to get all of the federal dollars and making something good in the community. It was everybody protecting their fiefdom. And that's not helping us creatively, financially, economically, or socially. So you look at the blacksciencefiction.com website, blacksciencefiction.com. Yeah, and you see that it is a gathering place for so many people, so many talented people.
Right.
And it's getting to the point where, like you said, you're mad as hell that the rest of the world doesn't know about black speculative fiction. And I'm going,
I want people to know about Octavia Butler the way they know about John Steinbeck.
Exactly. And the thing is that I believe that if we just hang on a few more years, this is going to explode. Because you have all of these Afrofuturism conferences.
Oh, absolutely.
Every single person you talk to, you, me, anybody who write or do any of this, we all know who Octavia Butler is. And we'll be the first people to tell someone else, you have to read this or you have to read that. And so I think that we may be getting to where it may be a sociological critical mass for American culture. That's where I'm keeping my fingers crossed, and that's where I'm pushing.
At the Octavia Butler celebration at Spelman last March, I there was after the event, there was a book signing in all of the writers.
Okay.
We're talking. There was Stephen Barnes, obviously, and Tananarive Due, who was the Cosby Chair at Spelman College, and this was her culminating event. There was Niecy Shaw, there was Sheree Renee Thomas, there was Jewel Gomez, there was Chip Delaney. There was Brandon. There was I'm trying to remember names now, but they were all these writers there. And I was at the table with afterwards. They were all at tables signing books, and so I'm at the ladies' table, and it was just interesting to me that there were like some older white guys there who, they must have brought like a bag full of books for Chip to sign. I was just like, wow, like, why don't we have black people with bags of books for him to sign? I was thinking, I was there, and I was taking pictures, and there were other black people there who had books to sign. Granted, I'm not sharing that. But, some of the white people, there were some white people there, and it was like they literally came just to have him sign books. I swear. It was like they came like, oh, I got to get his signature. And, this one guy set his bag on the table and pulled out all of these books and Chip gracefully, signed all of them. But it was like, man, he's, he acts celebrity. Like, I just didn't, oh my gosh, I just didn't get it. But anyway, they were there. They got book signed. They knew about his work. And I was just like, man, I really wish that more of us.
Well, and I think that we're going to see more of that. I mean, look at all of the Black Age conventions that are now, you've got Detroit, you've got Atlanta, you've got events in the New York area, New York, and maybe even across, I don't know, New Jersey. Who wants to go to New Jersey? But anyway, but you have, it appears to me, and to be very honest with you, I hope I live long enough to see it happen, because I truly believe that it's going to happen. And it's not something that we're looking, the internet.
I hope that I live righteously enough to make it happen.
Yeah. And the thing is that it's not, it's not something that I think is going to be able to be hidden much longer. If you look at what we call mainstream speculative fiction.
Right.
And other than vampires and
Edgar Allan Poe and
and Hunger Games and crap like that.
Honger Games
or let's look at the so-called
Twilight,
hottest book,
which is
the hottest book this year. Yeah, the hottest book this year was a piece of crap. It was 50 Shades of Grey. That was horribly written.
Oh gosh!
Even the section it wasn't that good. I couldn't either. But see, that's the thing. You've got kind of an abbreviated acculturation in this country, where people will glom onto something good or bad merely because it gets the attention. And I think what the internet does is it allows bad memes to flourish, because people are more likely to repeat what they hear rather than think about what they see and hear and try to, separate the wheat from the chaff.
I agree.
So hopefully, the series that you're doing is going to pick up traction. I'm doing a 7-book series, 2 trilogies and a 7th volume that winds it up.
Oh, wow.
Actually, if you go to blacksciencefictionsociety.com, our administrator has been very, very helpful in putting some advertising up on a banner about the Dark Side trilogy.
Okay.
But again, I'm like you. I despair of. I wonder. Okay, when are things going to happen? When is this genre, and not so much just for me, but just for the genre itself in general, when is it going to garner the attention that it deserves? Because it is far more creative than what common culture is providing us right now.
Absolutely. I mean, and I'm a person. I wrote I wrote an editorial for Black Literature magazine, for Yahoo Voices, and for Southern Writers. I also write on southernwriters.com. And I wrote about, an article about leaving reviews on Amazon. I talked about that and what readers don't know. But I talked about how I wasn't a fan of the Harry Potter series. I'm not. And I've read the first 3 books, and I pushed myself through them. I forced myself through them. And I was just like, man, how can this sell like a gazillion copies? And I just, and there are a lot of reasons for it, but I'm totally with you on that.
Well, Harry Potter was new. Nobody had written anything like it, and that helped. I think that helped push it, and I think it was like Rocky and Bullwinkle. It was appreciated on 2 levels, by children and by the adults. The adults saw the political humor in Rocky and Bullwinkle, and the kids loved, that a moose and a squirrel, we're hanging out together and having these adventures. But you look at Game of Thrones and what was that other one with Katniss? Hunger Games. The Hunger Games.
Okay.
And these And the Twilight series, oh, talk about bad rehash.
The Twilight series is horrible writing. I'm sorry,
I know,
Stephanie Myers, and I know at some point somebody will play this, and you said this, but hey, I don't like it. It was terrible.
And it's not good writing. I mean, what it is it's very commercial. It's very superficial. And we have such brilliantly creative people. You mentioned some, who are writing in this Afrofuturism in Black speculative fiction, Black science fiction, horror, fantasy, and comic books. We have artists. We have we even have musicians who are creating, some cutting edge things and not just going along with, spinning urban beats. And we have all of this going on, and I truly believe that, it could just be because I've lived in it for a few years now.
Right.
But I don't want to think that. I want to think that seeing the potential and seeing the quality that this has to explode. It has to explode. And
it's quality projects. Let me just say that there's a sister also on Facebook and also on Black Science Fiction Society, and Sister Val Jean Jeffers.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm reading her Immortal series, and I just recently ordered all of her books. Just fantastic. And she's on Create Space. I mean, and I'm really critical when it comes to writing. I read things, I'm like really critical of it. I mean, in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, so, look for all the things that, critics look for. But, I mean, it's just a fantastic series so far. And I finished her first book in like two or 3 days, and then started on the second one. She's one, like I said, Milton Davis, Balagun Ojitade, I mean, Brandon Easton. There's so many writers that just, and then, of course, I'm working on, my little series, yours, and everything. But like you said, I think the time is really coming. I think there will be this time period in the same way that happened for urban fiction. I think it's coming. It's definitely, I think it's kind of already here. It's, kind of the calm before the storm right now.
I think you're right. And even though fewer and fewer people are reading, which is obviously is a damn shame.
Right. Absolutely.
The other thing that I think that we have to invest in is creating our next generation of customers, which means getting kids to read more. And how do you do that?
Absolutely.
Well, we have a wealth. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, no, I was just going to share that I have a 17-month-old nephew, Isaac, and I'm like, I already told my sister, I'm like, he's going to be reading some speculative fiction and these wonderful writers early on, and along with everything else.
And, well, the other thing, to assure him of reading, it's so simple. Just read to him. If you read to him, he's going to read. I mean, I did the same thing with my daughter. When we would get together, she would wake me up in the morning, and she always brought 3 books. And we had to read 3 books before the day started, because that's what I used to do with her. And then at night I would read her a story, obviously. And she reads a ton of stuff. She's a teenager now, and she reads all the time. So, I can't stress any more importantly that, Black parents, read to your children. And
not only that, but Black writers, you give the next generation, the current generation, the next and the next and the next posterity, give them stories with people of color. And we're doing that. I don't think we're doing that. Give them stories with people of color. There's so many stereotypes within film, within writing of Black people, and everything. And I think that we're doing a wonderful job with all of the writers that I named of giving us the full picture of Black humanity in writing. And that's important. We're not just the magic Negro. We're not just a villain or the sidekick. we are the hero.
Or the comic relief, the
right,
foolish,
the
clownish
we are the
comic
hero.
relief. Yeah.
We are the hero. That's who we are, and it's important that we pass that on to the next generation, because I have no interest in the next generation having low self-esteem. It is our responsibility as speculative fiction writers to maintain and mainly increase the self-esteem of Black children. That's why we're here. Whether or not we realize it, that's why we're here.
And we can't self-sabotage. I went to a lecture here at the University of Chicago by Harvard-educated Kenneth Warren, PhD. He also teaches at the University of Chicago now. And he's written, books and articles on the fact that we are in a post-Black literature America, that there is no such thing as Black literature anymore, because we don't have the pushback of slavery times to delineate, the differences between Black and white literature. He says, all literature, unless you have some sort of struggle, you can't delineate the literature as being other than American literature, which to me was complete BS, and I said so in front of a bunch of people, and I don't think I'm ever going to be invited back again. But the fact of the matter is, if that's the case, then all we have in America is we have American literature and LGBTQ literature.
That's totally not true. Tell them to read
exactly
Leaving Atlanta by Tayari Jones, and Tayari Jones is a mainstream literary fiction writer. She's the young Toni Morrison. That's BS.
That is, well, not only that, but his own imprint, the University of Chicago's own publishing imprint, has a Black literature section. So, we can't self-sabotage either. And I don't care if you're a highfalutin Black academic who thinks he's, because he's got letters,
right.
He can sit back and make pronouncements like that, which I think are damaging to the culture, because what they do is they try to they tend to dissuade people.
Because they have an audience.
But he's devaluing what he has to offer as well. That's I never understood that. So
that's the thing. That's why I'm probably, some people said to me, you're more of a moderate, and I'm okay with labels. No, I'm not into labels, but I'm okay with that, because I just try to just kind of find this value in each culture and celebrate it. I'm not here to overly pronounce or make dominant the weaknesses of each culture. I mean, it's just we have to be responsible. We have to be very responsible as Black writers, and in Black speculative fiction, I think Octavia Butler did a wonderful job of this throughout her works. She criticized the things that needed to be criticized and praised the things that needed to be praised, and she provided empathy for the things with which more empathy was needed. And the funny thing is, I think sometimes I think, oh gosh, what if I would have met her? What kind of conversations we have had? I think we would have gotten along, despite all the differences there. But we have a responsibility to the Black community to provide balance and to give the heroes and sheroes. And I think that we're doing a wonderful job of that. It's a matter of patience right now.
And persistence. You have to be persistent. You can't give up just because you had a bad Tuesday. If you had a bad Tuesday, that means you're not going to do anything Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Hell no. You have to keep getting up and keep pushing.
Right.
So tell me a little bit, or tell us a little bit about maybe some future projects you have. We're in about the last 20 minutes of the show. What do you think you're going to be doing maybe a few years down the road?
I'm going to continue politically doing what I do.
Right, of course.
I'm going to be continuing to extend humanity to everyone. And let me just say that that was something that Stephen Barnes impressed upon me, to extend humanity. I'm going to continue doing that. I'm going to be writing more fantasy. I actually have a lot of things in mind in science fiction and fantasy that I will be writing. So I actually have, once I finish this series, I mean, this is like my baby, so to speak. But I'm the type of person, I'm a scientist also, and I think about things just like the scientific method. I hypothesize, and I come up with an experiment or a way to test it in writing. I have probably like 10 other projects that I've taken the time in my journal. I write it down. When I have a question, I write down what else is, and I, write down all my thoughts about that. So I have so many projects lined up that I want to write about. Most of them, they have social implications about humanity, about a lot of things. There's a whole lot.
So you've got a bunch of ideas.
Absolutely.
That you're going to be setting to paper, as they say.
Yes, and I will tell you that the one of the things I've already been working on, also along with my current writing, is that I'm writing a novel about what different civil rights leaders, from Frederick Douglass, to MLK, Malcolm X, is
right.
A story, and this is the first time I've really talked about it outside of private friends, but
nobody will tell anybody else.
Right. I'm writing this story, this kind of historical journey, where we see history through their eyes.
Through the participants' eyes?
Through the eyes of, Frederick Douglass in particular.
Right.
Through
the historical, historical personalities' eyes.
Right. It's history told through the various participants.
Okay, cool.
Anyway, yeah, it's interesting, but I'm putting that together now, and I've been doing a ton of research on that, in that regard. So that's one of the things that I am working on. And they're not all black.
Right.
So it's interesting. So I'm working on that because one of the questions that someone asked me on my page, probably about 2 years ago, someone asked me, what would Frederick Douglass or Martin Luther King or such think about, Barack Obama's presidency or him being elected? So I decided I wanted to answer that question. So it's all leading up to that point. So I'm working on that slowly now, too.
Do you know about Kevin Wilmot's movie that he just completed? He doesn't have distribution yet, called Destination Planet Negro?
I don't.
Take a look around. See, I'm sure he'll probably. I don't know if he's had a screening down by you. He had one here in Chicago, and it's making the film festival circuit because he's looking for distribution. But his premise was,
oh wow,
some 1930s Negroes got together to talk about the Negro problem, and the Negro problem was, where can we go and not be bothered by white folks? And they
really?
thought about all kinds of places on Earth. Yeah, and there were scientists, there were sociologists, lawyers, whatever. And what they did was they took all the money that they collected and they built a spaceship. And the spaceship was going to go to Mars to see if Mars was suitable for Negroes to all go there and not be bothered. And what they did was they went through a time warp, and these 1930s people ended up in 2010.
Oh, wow.
And having them walk around and to see, the picture of Barack Obama in the shop, and they go, well, who's that? Well, that's the president of the president. They go, what, of the United States? They said, yeah. And then they, of course, they fall out because who would have thought in the 1930s that we would be, in a very short historical amount of time to have a half black president of the United States. Most people, even in 2004, when he made that great speech at the Democratic National Convention, didn't think he would, never gave it much thought. But, I think your premise is a great one, because what it does is it allows you to explore the cultural and racial memes of the time and to compare them and contrast them or contrast them with today.
It's also John Brown. It's also President Lincoln. I mean, it's different, and I'm working on it and been doing a whole lot of research, and I've talked about it a little bit, but not much. But basically, the main premise is time travel, and in the afterlife, those who have not lived so honorable a life according to certain standards are, forced to watch certain time periods. So it's panning out. It's interesting. So I'm working on that, and even in there's a certain time period where certain people are watching Octavia Butler create works and the publication and all of that. So it's interesting. It's a little kind of different from the things I would normally write.
It's a great premise.
From things I would normally write. So I'm working on that along with the elements, and I'm having a lot of fun. So, great things to come. Come. And
let's talk about your creative day. In a day, how much time do you take to, in the name of your art, in the service of your art? How do you kind of structure your life around your creative endeavors?
I get up 5 mornings a week at 3:50 a.m. I write from 4 until about 8:30 in the morning, Eastern Standard Time. And then I come home after work and I write for about an hour, from about 7 to 8 or 8 to 9, usually 1 to 2 hours in the evening. But I primarily write in the wee hours of the morning when everything is still and quiet, and I can be at peace. And I write then, and I honestly, when I have writer's block, I still keep writing. And there's this recording on New York Public Library. They did a memoriam to Octavia Butler.
Okay.
Where Avery Brooks, of course, people mostly know him as Captain Sisko in the Star Trek franchise Deep Space Nine.
And never heard of it.
Oh,
I think the person you're talking to is. I think the person you're talking about is Spencer's sidekick, Hawk. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah.
Yeah.
I am kidding.
But yeah, he and a lot of other people. Samuel Delaney is on there too. But I listened to his reading from Parable of the Talents, and then Samuel Delaney sharing his thoughts on her, and Sonia Sanchez also reads from Bloodchild, and I listen to it when I have writer's block. I do, because Octavia Butler it inspires me, and then other people talk to her, and there are other people on it too. So I get up early. Sometimes I listen to a little bit of it, and then I start writing. But those are the hours that I write very early and then after work, and I write no matter how I feel. If I don't feel like writing, even if it's just a few paragraphs, I write. And
well, we're very similar.
I'm a slow writer, though. I'm really slow because I started this series, the first book. Oh my gosh, back in 2003, and here I am now. I'm slow, and it's evolved since then. But I'm just I feel blessed. And when can people get a look at, when do you think what's your timing for this series to be out? May of 2014. Memorial Weekend 2014 to be exact.
That's great. Oh,
yes.
And that's another thing. You mentioned that you do a lot of these different conventions and meetings and things like that. If there's an opportunity for people to meet you, for the public to come see you, excuse me, and maybe attend something that you're hosting or doing, please consider putting it on the BlackScienceFictionSociety.com events calendar, because we're trying to get people in the habit of taking a look at that calendar when they have a weekend coming up, and no matter where they are in the country, hopefully very soon there'll be a little something everywhere that they can check out. Obviously in Chicago coming in spring, we have C2E2, and then we've got all these Black Age conventions. We're trying to get all of that on there, and all of the BlackScienceFictionSociety.com members to post up any appearances, book signings, and things like that. So please keep that in mind.
Oh, absolutely.
So that people, when they have that opportunity, they can come and maybe meet you.
Absolutely. Definitely. I mean, I'm very excited about it, and it's been interesting for me because there have been a few people who, said to me, oh, yeah, you're going to sell a lot of books, but it's because you're a Republican and you got all those white people who like everything you write. And I do have a lot of followers and everything, but it's been weird for me because there is that large political audience I have who has heavily, let me tell you, I wanted to hire a really professional editor who is familiar with speculative fiction and had written it. So I did a Indigo fund Kickstarter last year. And I raised everything that I needed, even exceeded it for what I needed to pay for editing and everything. And it's weird for me because my liberal friends or some of my writer friends have just said, oh, yeah, you got all those white people behind you. So, yeah, you'll get it done or you'll sell a lot of books, but it won't be because you're a good writer. It'll be because you got all those white people behind you. And it's just heartbreaking for me. It has been when I've gotten those type of comments. Yeah, and it just goes back to what you said about support. And yeah, they have given money and done things to support it and everything, and I don't have everything out. But that was heartbreaking for me. But I got over it. I was just like, well, you do what you do, And I supported a lot of Black speculative fiction projects and film and different things like that because that's just where my heart is. But it's we got to really support each other and stop worrying about a person's personal politics or the fact that, you're Black and white people support you. It's been a kind of an internal battle for me because I wasn't really worried about, to some extent, I wasn't worried about, I definitely wasn't worried about white people reading my writing. But I was like, oh, I hope Black people read it because, people are hating on me. I guess,
well,
you're always talking
I
about
told
politics,
you about
this,
that.
and the other. So it's just, it's frustrating.
And it is, and because as a culture, subconsciously, there's something in our hindbrains that treats Black culture, being Black endeavor, Black creativity as a zero-sum game. And it is so, it's disheartening when you're a Black creative and you have to face up to that. And then when you have people talk about, oh, you only do well because white folks help you out, and my response to that would be damn SCIFI, because obviously they find something of mine of value. Why don't you? Okay, what is your problem? Why can't you read what I wrote? Why can't you support what I have done instead of standing there and, beating me over the head, like you said, beating you over the head about it because they perceive that the only reason why you're successful is because white folks made you that way.
Right.
And you know what?
And no one made me. The people that made me, my parents, my community, and they're all Black. And even the white people and black people, there were plenty of black people who supported me too. But
that's okay. That runs into my equation. I have a sociological equation, and the equation is faulty premise equals invalid conclusion. And the fact of the matter is, nobody
you sound
made
like a philosopher
you.
Now.
Girl,
sure
I wear a
that?
lot of hats. I got a big ass head. I
you
wear a lot
like
of hats.
Now.
But here's the deal. They're going, nobody made you. You wrote what you wrote. You created what you created. And the fact of the matter is, there is an audience, and it doesn't matter who the audience is. Obviously, your writing, your creativity, your endeavor has value to other people. And if they can't take that at its face value, or if they're jealous of that, which is probably far more likely, like you said, you have to have a thick skin about it. You have to have a thick skin about it, because you know what? You consider the source. These are not people who you would invite to your home. These are not people who are going to be significantly important to your life. And you can't, it goes back to that whole thing about haters. What is it about us? Where we can't enjoy or celebrate or support someone else's success without feeling that it's taking away from something of ours.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, and that's how, like I said, that's how I felt. And my work takes us back, way back, before Africa, before Europe, before the continents were formed. And I did it on purpose because I wanted to kind of take us back before the dawn of civilization, as we know it, and just take us back to our really, really beginnings, and just kind of erase all of our bias, all our confirmation biases, all those things, and just talk about, humanity, and just show how it all began, and go from there. And I can't help who supports me. And black people support me. There's some black people, black speculative fiction creators who supported me too, but it's rough being a black female conservative, libertarian, Republican writer sometimes.
Yeah, but you know what? Those are. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, and like I said, I have a lot of support. Facebook, there's a State of Black Science Fiction group, huge amounts of support. People disagree with politics, and I'm very, very grateful for that. But it's just been, in some sense, an uphill battle. But I am who I am politically, socially, morally, and I don't hide it. I don't hide it. And that's just who I am. You take it or you leave it, and that's it.
Yeah. If you ever get in a situation where you want to do either a speculative fiction story, I just thought of this because I think you'd be brilliant at it. If you ever wanted to do a point-counterpoint story, collaborative story with someone from the other end of the political spectrum, you should get a hold of me, because I think that there's some traction there that we might be able to wrestle out of it.
I have some musings in that regard, but I just haven't, taken it to fruition. But I have some musings in that regard. I just, have kind of let it just lay latent. I haven't done anything with it.
Well, keep me in mind, just because we are normally we're from opposite ends of the political spectrum.
Oh,
but we have
boxing gloves up.
Yeah, but we have far more things in common that we have in opposition.
Okay.
And that's the essence of humanity. The fact that people have these ironclad labels that keep them apart is what the problem is,
Absolutely.
Not necessarily what their beliefs are, because everybody wants to have a good life for themselves and their families and their children. Everybody wants to be able to afford the things that make for a quality life. Everybody wants to be able to pick and choose their friends and expect to have a good experience with their friends. So all of those, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is not that different from everybody, from one person to the next. And people have been forgetting that and letting other considerations get in their way. We have about 2 minutes left here.
Okay.
And I want to thank you for spending this time with me and making this very, very, very easy. One thing I do want to remind everybody who listens to this both live and as a podcast, the Genesis Science Fiction radio show is on every Friday night at 9 p.m. Eastern, and it's the, follow the clock around to the other time zones. And remind your friends that the show is on, and when it's live, you can jump in the chat room and ask questions. And also, very shortly after each broadcast, each show is a podcast. So, obviously, Talitha, you'll be able to go ahead and tell your people, well, I was on this show with this this progressive
I know some
reverend.
of them are listening, and then I want to share the podcast. I want to thank you so much for your hospitality.
Oh, it's been a pleasure.
Despite me being a Republican and a conservative libertarian.
Seriously. I'll be the first one to tell you right now, I don't have to hate anybody. You know why? Because we all have to live on this world together, and if we don't get along, it's not going to be good for anybody.
Absolutely. So, and Jarvis, I don't know if he's listening or there.
No, actually, it's his turn to talk. He gets to close out every show. So, Jarvis, go ahead and take it away. And hold on after the recording is over. I have a couple questions for you, okay? Thank you very much.
Well, goodness, I'm here in my bunker listening to this show, and it's one of the most interesting shows that we've had. It really is. I want to thank everyone for participating, our guests. It's been wonderful and enlightening. I want to thank everyone for tuning in, and as usual, thanking our birthday boy, Mr. William, for
happy birthday to you.
Thank you.
Happy birthday, man. Thank you so much for taking your time out and participating on the show and making it the great thing that it is.
It's always a pleasure. I have a great time doing it. I get to meet the greatest people. And I'm not just saying that. I mean, tonight was special, and I'm serious about talking about a collaboration later because there's merit in that. So, on behalf of everybody who helps put this show together, all the guests, and me as the most of the time host, this has been the Genesis Science Fiction Radio Show, a service of the BlackScienceFictionSociety.com website. We're here every Friday. Tell your friends and catch all the podcasts and check out all the earlier shows. On behalf of the site, I want to say good night to everybody, and thank you for listening.
All right, good night.
Good night. Good night. Good night. Good night. Good night. Good night. Good night. Good night. Good night. Good night. Good night. Good night. Good night.